Story: The Thing That Followed Me Home. In 2016, I went on a road trip through the Southwest. I loved driving through the empty desert highways, miles of nothing but sand, sky, and the occasional rundown gas station. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I stopped at a tiny roadside motel in New Mexico. It was the only building for miles, a faded neon sign flickering above the office. I should have kept driving, because something was waiting for me there. The man at the front desk. The motel looked abandoned, but when I stepped inside the office, a man was sitting behind the desk. His skin was pale, too pale. His hair was slicked back, and he didn't blink when he spoke. "Need a room?" His voice was flat, like he was reading from a script. I nodded, feeling uneasy. He handed me a key. "Room 106. "You'll be the only guest tonight," he said. I forced a laugh. "Slow business?" He didn't smile. "Just you." I should have left. The first knock. The room was off. The bed was made, the TV worked, but something felt wrong, like the air was too heavy, too thick. I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and tried to sleep. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up. Someone was knocking on my door. Soft, rhythmic, 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. I froze. The motel was empty. Who the hell was knocking? I didn't move. I just listened. Then, a whisper, right outside the door. "I know you're awake." The hallway. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Slowly, I crept toward the door. I held my breath and looked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I exhaled, my heart pounding. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was a dream. Then, something moved. Not walking, crawling, low to the ground. Fast. I stepped back just as the knocking started again. But this time, it came from inside the closet. The closet should have been empty. I didn't want to open it. Every instinct in my body screamed, "Don't!" But I had to know. I grabbed the doorknob with shaking hands and pulled. Inside, the closet was empty. Just a single wire hanger, swaying slightly. Then, I noticed something. The carpet. It was wet. The mirror. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the bed, gripping my phone, waiting for the sun to rise. At dawn, I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face. And that's when I saw it, in the bathroom mirror. A handprint, not mine. Too long, too thin, like something had been watching me all night. I grabbed my things and ran. I wasn't alone in my car. I sped out of that motel so fast I nearly ran off the road. I told myself it was over. Just a bad night. Just my imagination. Then, my rearview mirror shifted, and in the back seat I saw it. A pale face, grinning, and it whispered, "You shouldn't have opened the door." I slammed on the brakes, jumped out of the car, but there was nothing there, just an empty back seat. But when I got back in, I noticed something on the window, a single wet handprint. It followed me home. It's been years, but I still wake up at 2:17 a.m. Sometimes I hear knocking, soft, rhythmic, 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. And sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see a handprint, waiting. Story: The Forgotten Patient. In 2012, I worked as a night security guard at an old hospital in upstate New York. The place was shutting down. Only a few wings were still in use, and the rest were abandoned, left to rot. My job was simple: watch the cameras, patrol the empty halls, and report anything unusual. I never expected to find someone still living there. The hallway that should have been empty. One night around 3 a.m., I was watching the security monitors when I saw something strange. A figure in the East Wing. That part of the hospital had been closed for years. No patients, no staff, nothing. But there he was, a tall, thin man standing in the middle of the hallway, wearing an old faded hospital gown. His back was to the camera, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. I picked up the radio and called the other guard. "Hey, we got a trespasser in the East Wing," the radio crackled. "Impossible. The doors are locked. No one can get in." I looked back at the screen. The hallway was empty. The room that shouldn't exist. I had to check it out. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the East Wing. The air felt thick, like the building was holding its breath. When I reached the hallway, I froze. The man was still there, but this time he was facing me. I stepped forward, ready to call out, and he was gone. No sound, no movement, just gone. But where he had been standing, I noticed something else. A door. An old hospital room. Number 733. That wasn't possible. I had patrolled this hallway 100 times. There was no room 733. The number was barely visible. The metal rusted, the paint peeling. I grabbed the handle. It was ice cold and unlocked. Inside room 733, I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Rot. The room was small with a single hospital bed, rusted metal cabinets, and peeling wallpaper. But the worst part? The bed was occupied. A thin, frail figure lay beneath the sheets, its skin stretched tight over bone. The air was thick with decay, but as I stared at the body, I saw it breathing. Shallow, weak breaths. I stepped closer, heart pounding. Then the eyes opened, dark, hollow, and they locked onto mine. The mouth moved. A whisper, barely audible, "You're not supposed to see me." The files. They tried to erase. I stumbled out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I ran back to the security office, shaking, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. I searched the hospital records. There was no room 733, no record of it ever existing. But then, buried in an old file from the 1950s, I found something. A patient, admitted in 1953. Name, unknown condition, unresponsive status, non-recoverable. The final note sent a chill through my spine. Patient does not respond to treatment. Patient does not eat, sleep, or speak. Yet patient remains alive. Do not move. Do not disturb. The last patrol. The next night I refused to check the East Wing, but around 3 a.m. my radio crackled. "Security, report to the East Wing immediately." I froze. I hadn't touched the radio. Then, a whisper coming through the speaker. "You left the door open." I quit the next morning. The hospital shut down 2 months later. They demolished the entire building. But I still dream about room 733. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I hear the whisper. "You weren't supposed to see me." Story: The Man in the Crawl Space. In 2018, my friend Kevin moved into a cheap rental house in rural West Virginia. It was old, creaky, and had been sitting empty for years. The landlord was eager to rent it out. Too eager. The first time Kevin asked why the last tenants left, the landlord just muttered, "People come and go." Kevin should have asked more questions. because something was already living in the house. The first sign. The first few nights were uneventful. The place was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against you. Too heavy, too unnatural. Then one night Kevin noticed something strange. The attic hatch was open, just an inch. He was sure it had been closed before, but maybe he was imagining things. Still, he grabbed a chair, reached up, and shut it tight. An hour later, he heard a noise, a soft, dragging sound, coming from inside the attic. The crawling sound. The next night, it got worse. Kevin woke up at 2:43 a.m. to a sound coming from inside the walls. A slow scraping noise, like something with nails was moving through the crawl spaces. It stopped. Then, a whisper, muffled, like someone was talking through the vents. Kevin froze. The whispering was right behind the wall next to his bed. He held his breath, straining to hear. Then, something knocked. 3 slow, heavy knocks from inside the wall. The air vent. The next day, Kevin decided to check the crawl space. There was an access panel in the hallway, leading to the narrow space between the walls. He unscrewed it, heart pounding. The second he pulled it open, a smell hit him. Rot, sweat, something old and wet. He shined his flashlight inside, and his stomach dropped. There was a mattress, a pile of blankets, and on the wall, deep scratches, long, jagged marks carved into the wood. Kevin backed away. Then he noticed the vent above him. The metal grate had been unscrewed, as if someone had been crawling through it. The thing in the shadows that night, Kevin didn't sleep. He sat in bed clutching a knife, waiting. At exactly 3:12 a.m., he heard it again. The vent above his bed shifted. Then a soft giggle. He bolted upright. The giggle wasn't human. Slowly his bedroom door creaked open, and in the darkness of the hallway, he saw it, a figure, bent over, its body twisted, crawling on all fours. It was too thin, too long, and it was smiling. He never got his things back. Kevin ran, didn't even pack. He jumped into his car and drove until sunrise. When he called the landlord the next day, the man just sighed. "Yeah," he muttered, "that happens sometimes." Kevin hung up and never went back. A month later, the house was back on the market, still dirt cheap, still waiting for the next tenant. Story: The Thing in the Cornfield. In 2015, my cousin Daniel moved to a small town in Nebraska to take care of his grandmother's farm after she passed away. It was a quiet, isolated place, miles of cornfields in every direction, no neighbors for miles. He loved the solitude until he saw something moving in the fields at night. The first time he noticed it. The first few weeks were uneventful. During the day, he worked on the house, fixed the barn, and tended to what little of the farm was still salvageable. Then one night, while drinking a beer on the back porch, he saw something, a shape in the cornfield. At first, he thought it was a scarecrow, but then it moved, just a little, a small shift, like it had turned to look at him. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. He shined his flashlight toward the field. Nothing, just rows of corn swaying in the wind. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The footsteps in the corn. A week later, it got worse. He woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of rustling outside. Slow, deliberate movements between the rows of corn, like footsteps. Grabbing his flashlight, he stepped outside. The night was silent. The air felt thick, too still. Then, a whisper, low, raspy, coming from the cornfield. He aimed the light toward the sound, and for a split second he saw it, a tall, thin figure standing between the rows. Its arms were too long, its fingers stretched out like claws. The moment the light hit it, it disappeared. Not ran, not ducked, just vanished. The corn stalks were wrong. The next morning, Daniel went to check the field. That's when he noticed something was wrong. The corn stalks, they weren't standing straight anymore. They were bent, twisted, like something tall had been walking between them. And in the dirt, footprints, not human, not animal, just long, deep impressions, as if something with unnatural legs had been pacing through the field. It got inside. Daniel started locking his doors at night, but that didn't stop it. A few nights later, he woke up to a sound, a soft tap, tap, tap against his bedroom window. His stomach dropped. His room was on the second floor. Slowly, he turned over in bed. Outside the window, a face, pale, stretched, featureless, except for two deep, hollow eyes. It was watching him. Then it grinned, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far. Daniel bolted upright, but the second he blinked, the face was gone. But the glass, it was covered in handprints. The final night, Daniel called me the next day, voice shaking. I need to get out of here. That night he didn't sleep. He sat in his truck, gripping his shotgun, staring at the fields. Then around 3 a.m., the corn moved, not just swaying in the wind. Something was walking through it, slow, deliberate. The whispering started again, closer this time. And then the screen door creaked open. Daniel sped off without looking back. He never returned. The farm was abandoned, left to rot. Sometimes I wonder, did it let him go? Or was it just waiting for someone new to move in? Story: The House That Knew My Name. In 2009, I moved to a small town in Pennsylvania for work. The town was old, full of abandoned factories and crumbling houses, the kind of place where everyone knows each other and strangers are noticed immediately. I found a cheap place to rent, a two-story Victorian home that had been empty for years. The landlord was eager to get rid of it, offering me a ridiculously low price. I should have wondered why, because the house knew my name. The Locked Room. The house was beautiful, even if it was a bit run down. High ceilings, creaky wooden floors, and an eerie silence that settled in at night. There was only one problem. The door at the end of the upstairs hallway was locked. No key, no explanation. Just a heavy, old-fashioned door with a rusted handle. The landlord had mumbled something about it being unsafe and that I should leave it alone. I tried not to think about it until the knocking started. The voice in the walls. The first time I thought it was the house settling. A faint tap, tap, tap in the walls late at night. But soon the knocking became deliberate. 3 knocks, pausing, then 3 more, coming from inside the locked room. One night I pressed my ear to the door, and I heard it, a voice, whispering my name, not shouting, not calling, whispering, like something on the other side was waiting for me. The first night I saw it. One night I had a dream. At least, I think it was a dream. I was lying in bed, unable to move. The room was dark except for the moonlight spilling through the window. Then, the door at the end of the hallway creaked open. A shadow stepped out, tall, thin, unnatural. It didn't walk, it glided. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel it watching me. It stood there motionless, as if waiting for something. Then, it whispered my name, right next to my ear. I woke up gasping for air, but when I turned toward the hallway, my stomach dropped. The door at the end of the hall, it was open. Something was living in the walls. After that, things got worse. I'd hear footsteps at night when I was the only one home. My things would go missing, only to turn up inside the locked room. One night, I saw shadows moving under the door. I called the landlord, demanding answers. He hesitated, then finally said, "I should have told you. The last tenant, she disappeared, vanished. The police never found her. She was obsessed with that room, said she heard voices. Then one night she just left. Or at least that's what we tell people. That was the last straw. I broke the door down. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a hammer and smashed the door open. Inside, the room was empty. No furniture, no windows, just four walls covered in deep, claw-like scratches, and on the floor, a single word carved into the wood. Stay. That night, I slept in my car. The next morning, I packed my things and left. I never went back. The house is still there, still empty, and sometimes I wonder, did the last tenant really leave? Or is she still in that room, waiting for the next person to hear her whisper?